Okay, so today what we're going to do is 2, 8, 23. We're going to basically be solving quadratics. Now in math, probably the hardest thing, as always about math, is just the darn words. So when I see quadratics, really it means x squared equation. So I'm going to basically it's any x squared equation, okay? So the word quadratics in math, we're just talking about x squared equation, okay? And again, we know that there are two answers, always. Two answers, right? Well, what we need to do on these is have them equal to 0. It's called, there's a rule, it's called the rule of 0, but we need to have them, we need to have all equations equal 0. And here is why. They never teach why until I get here. It's always been two answers. Why does that equal 0? Something times 0 is always what?
0.
Or something times 0 is always? So you have to equal 0 in order to get. Now if I have something times something equals 1, it's a lot of combinations, correct? But if it equals 0, there's only one way to do it. Something times 0 is 0. So that's why it has to equal 0, okay? So in example 1, let's bring the 8 over, okay? So let's bring the 8 over to make it equal to 0. So I will subtract the 8, I'll bring it over. I don't really like to show the subtract 8. We're in pre-calc, so I can just bring it over, and everybody knows that I have to subtract it to bring over, right? Everybody good on that? And then Emily's not here. She went to the bathroom, but this is the one that she factored, right? With a plain old x squared, it gets really easy. You don't have a leading coefficient. It's multiple of 8. Multiples of negative 8 that come up to be a negative 2, so I'd have an x minus 4 and x plus 2, right? We are solving, so I call them mini equations, right? Remember I used to call them mini equations? So we go to our mini equations. Mini equations are going to be x minus 4 equals 0 and x plus 2 equals 0, right? And then I'm just going to go plus 4, x equals 4, minus 2, and x equals negative 2, okay? Now, you don't have to check these, but it's worth showing why they both work. If I were to plug in both these answers into the original, right? If I did this and I plugged in, for instance, 4, I'd go, well, 4 squared minus 2 times 4 better equal 8, right? Whoa, what do you know? And if I plugged in negative 2 squared minus 2 times a negative 2, it better equal 8. Well, what do you know? Okay, so both answers work. Okay. Now, example 2 is a little bit more difficult with factoring because you have a leading coefficient, and that's where we're going to use the double smiley to check. How am I doing? Am I going too fast? Okay. Lexi, am I doing okay?
Yeah.
Okay, you slow me down, won't you? When you need to, okay?
Okay.
So on example 2, same thing. Let's make it equal to 0. So I'm going to bring over the 13x and the 7. So I'll rewrite it as a 2x squared minus 13x minus 7 equals 0, okay? And I'm going to factor. 2x and x is the only combination you can do. 2x and x. Only thing you can do to make a 2x squared, 2x times 2. Now, the 7, you got to be careful on the 7. If you put it in the wrong place, 7 and 1. You agree? 7 and 1? 7 times 1. But you got to be careful. What I see is the 7 here because I can get a 14. See the 14? I want a 13, but if I put the 7 here and a 1 here, I can get. Now, if I do it wrong, I erase, and I just switch things around. Really, if I do it wrong, I erase it, and I can just do it again. Now, I need a negative 13, so I'm thinking negative 14, positive 1. Again, you can check these by multiplying it out, but that's a negative 14x and a positive 1x does make the negative 13x. Okay, thumbs up. Does that make sense? How I check that? There's your negative 14. There's your positive 1, which combines to make my negative 13. Again, I have my mini equations, so I'm going to go ahead and set them equal to 0. 2x plus 1 equals 0. I think my pen's dying on me. It's time to get rid of my pen and get a new pen. And then I also have an x minus 7 equals 0. Minus 1, divide by 2. First answer is negative 1/2. Plus 7, I get positive 7, okay? And you can check it. I'm not going to check it, but you can check both those, and they will both work, okay? Okay, now number 3, you're really tempted to put it into mini equations, but you can't. It must equal 0. It must equal 0. So it won't work. It absolutely needs to equal 0. So what I'm going to do is first, I'm going to have to FOIL this out and bring over the 11. This takes a little bit of work, but I'm going to have to do a little bit of work to get it done. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply through, right? I'm going to FOIL. 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times 4 is positive 12x. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times 4 is a negative 8 equals negative 11. Okay? So my goal is to make it into a trinomial equal to 0. Trinomial equal to 0. Okay, so then 3x squared plus 10x, and I will add the 11, and I'll get a plus 3. Ah, that looks like a warm-up, doesn't it? It does look like warm-up. Sometimes I do that on purpose, huh? Right? So we'll factor 3x, x, and in our warm-up we knew it was 1 and 3 here to make 9. 9 and 1, 9 and 1 to make the 10, plus 1 plus 3 makes my 9, plus 1 makes 10x. Okay, but we're still solving, so we're not done. 3x plus 1 equals 0, and x plus 3 equals 0. And then we just have to finish it up. Minus 1, divide by 3, x is a negative 1/3. Minus 3, x is negative 3. Okay, how am I doing? Okay. Now, you're starting to see the difference between pre-calculus and Algebra 2, right? That problem's a little bit more involved than what you would have seen in Algebra 2, okay? Okay, but not difficult for you. You can do it. Okay, turn the page. Okay, now, what if it doesn't factor? Well, that's okay. We just use the quadratic formula, okay? So, I'm going to bring the 4x over because it needs to equal 0. It needs to equal 0. Okay, it has to equal 0. So I bring the 4x over. I'll have a 2x squared minus 4x plus 7 equals 0. Okay? Now the quadratic formula is not difficult. It's just plug and chug. That's it. Occasionally, once in a blue moon, I have a kid that hates factoring and loves this. Because they don't have to factor, right? So negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay? And a is 2, b is negative 4, and c is 7. A, b, c. Right? How am I doing? So let's plug and chug. Here we go. Lexi, how am I doing?
Can you stop for a second?
I'd be happy to. That's why I asked, okay?
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm all good.
Okay. So negative b. So I'm going to go negative 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 squared minus 4, because that's in the formula, times a, which is 2 times c, which is 7, all over, big, all over the whole thing, 2 times a, which is 2, okay? Plug and chug, we just have to simplify, right?
I got 2 sets of unreal answers with the calculator. Have enough to break the calculator?
Hold on to that thought, let me finish it and I'll take a look, okay? You could have put it in wrong, but we'll check. Positive 4 plus or minus square root of 16. So Charles, part of the problem could be right here. If you don't use parentheses there, it'll give you a negative 16.
I made it 16 when I plugged it in.
It actually, you know what, it is unreal. I can see this already. It is, because I can see this is what, 56, right? So I know it's going to be imaginary. Right now I know it's an imaginary number, okay? Because that's going to be a negative 40.
Yep.
Charles, you were right. So I'm going to have 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 40 over 4. Now, we can let's fix this answer. Fix this answer. What does that mean? Well, I know there's going to be an I in it, correct? And I also know that I can break down the square root of 40. So let's fix this answer. All right, so I'm going to go 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 times the square root of 10, the square root of negative 1, all over 4, okay? So I just broke my negative 40 into 4, 10, and negative 1. Okay? And I did that for a reason. I'm going to get a 2 and an I. Okay? I'm going to get a 2 and an I. So I'll have a 4 plus or minus 2 square root of 10 I. And I like the I in the end. Sometimes this book puts the I in the middle. I believe it should be at the end, all over 4. Okay? Now, I would take this answer, but it should be real plus imaginary. It should be 4 over 4 plus or minus 2 over 4 square root of 10i. It should be real plus imaginary. And then finally, how about a 1 plus or minus 1/2 square root of 10i? How's that? Okay. And that's all I have. There's not a lot of problems because you don't need a lot. I don't believe in giving a lot of homework, just making sure you do it, right? And then tomorrow we'll play a Kahoot, okay? Because I would have done it today on factoring, but